So, good morning, good afternoon, whenever you watch this, that's whatever. But I'm going to be drawing out cardiac output on this nice whiteboard with all of these colors. Probably not going to use them all, but that's not the point. Okay, so cardiac output. Cardiac output is measured in milliliters per minute. So it's how much blood your heart pumps out per minute in milliliters. So cardiac output, milliliters per minute. And the average cardiac output is going to be around like 4,900 milliliters per minute or 4.9 liters per minute. Okay. And so the equation for cardiac output would be stroke volume times your heart rate. And so stroke volume is how much blood your heart pumps with one beat, right? So it's going to be measured in milliliters per beat. And the average of this is going to be about 70 milliliters per beat. And then your heart rate is just the frequency at which your heart pumps. So, and the average there's like a range like 60 to 100, but for these purposes, we can do 70, and that's measured in beats per minute. Okay. And so, looking at things that can alter your cardiac output, stroke volume, there's three things that we're going to pay attention to. So, first one's going to be preload. So, the preload of the heart. Okay. And this is just kind of signifying that with more, the more that the heart muscle is stretched, the harder the contraction is going to be. So if you have a higher preload, then your contraction is going to be stronger because you're forcing that blood out. You gotta push that out with a stronger force. And so things that can increase your preload as well as your cardiac output would be exercise and a slow heart rate. Okay, and so those are going to increase your preload, which will lead to an increase in your cardiac output and increase in stroke volume. And then things to decrease preload, stroke volume, and cardiac output would be a fast heart rate and blood loss. Okay. So that's preload. The next thing would be contractility. And so this is just kind of showing that the heart can pump at different strengths. So, let me write this down real quick. Okay, and so things to increase your contractility would be an increase in your calcium concentration. And then to signify concentration, I put it in brackets. So I have a bracketed calcium ion there. Then we have adrenaline, your sympathetic nervous system, abbreviated SNS, and then cardiac drugs. And again, those are going to increase your contractility, increase your stroke volume, and then increase your cardiac output. Okay. Now, things to decrease this would be increased concentration of potassium. Okay, and then acidosis, or an increase in your acid in the blood, or acid concentration in the blood. And then calcium channel blockers. Okay, that's contractility. And then, so before we move on to afterload, it's kind of odd in the relationship or how it relates to cardiac output and stroke volume. But I'm going to show you this just for now. So right now, increasing cardiac output and whatever category that is, it will be in green, and decreasing would be in red. So here you can see cardiac output is equal to your stroke volume times your heart rate. You got milliliters per minute, milliliters per beat, and then beats per minute. And then 70 times 70 times 70 is equal to 4,900. And then different attributes here, different attributes here. And then we can move on to afterload. And afterload is kind of focusing on the aspect that with a higher force that, or higher higher load that the heart has to pump against. Yeah, no, the higher force that the heart has to pump against, the slower the contraction is going to be. So, to increase that, when we increase our afterload, we're going to decrease our cardiac output. So there's going to be an inverse relationship there. So to increase your afterload but decrease your cardiac output, you can have a high blood pressure. Stenosis will do this. And then a high hematocrit. Okay. And then to decrease afterload but increase your cardiac output, you can have a low blood pressure. BP. Okay. Then you can have elastic arteries. Okay, and then you can have thin blood. And that's afterload. And so, preload, contractility, and afterload directly affect your stroke volume. And your stroke volume is going to directly affect your cardiac output. And so, where there are aspects of these that will also alter your heart rate, like if you have an increased calcium concentration in your autorhythmic cells, then your heart rate is going to increase as well. So that these things can change your heart rate. These aren't the main things that we're looking at when we are evaluating that. So with your heart rate, you the main thing that affects this would be your autonomic nervous system, which can be split into two sections. So the first one is going to be the parasympathetic nervous system, abbreviated PNS, and that's going to be your rest and digest. All right, and this is going to decrease your heart rate. Okay, and then the other part is your sympathetic nervous system, or SNS. Okay, and that's going to be your fight or flight. All right. And then this is going to increase your heart rate. Yeah, I think that's it. I'll show you the board again. So, oh, fuck. Sorry. We got PNS here, your parasympathetic nervous system, rest and digest, decreasing your heart rate. Your sympathetic nervous system here, fight or flight, increasing your heart rate, all stemming from your autonomic nervous system, which, well, I'm going to try to draw upside down here. Directly correlates with your heart rate. That was terrible. But yeah. So just to recap, we got your cardiac output is affected by your stroke volume times your heart rate. Your stroke volume is influenced by your preload, contractility, and afterload, and your heart rate is influenced by your autonomic nervous system. And these two play together. They influence each other, but directly, this is how it works. Yeah.